Coming to you from the all-new Live House in Hollywood, California.
Welcome to this week's episode of Pensado's Place. Our guest, the incredible Joe Barresi, is on fire with Tool and Slipknot, and he's got a lot of information for you. But let's kick it off with our first two winners in the iLOUD Autumn Sweepstakes. That's where you can win either a pair of iLOUD MTMs or a pair of iLOUD micro monitors each week for the next 4 weeks. Well, actually, the next 3 weeks. Our first two winners are, for the iLOUD MTM, Henrik Schubert from right here in the good old USA, and from the UK, the micro monitors go to Angus Cattapan. Congratulations to you guys. Yes. And for the rest of you, enter your name right now by going to bit.ly/iLOUD Pensado. That's bit.ly/iLOUD Pensado, so you can be a winner as well. We want to be able to read your names. The good news for you guys is next week we're also starting a new sweepstakes for an essential tool in your producing and engineering toolbox, and that is Auto-Tune. I mean, it's literally a cultural phenomena, and it's used with artists like Kanye West, Billie Eilish, Post Malone, Travis Scott. You've heard a lot of our guests talk about it. You're an Auto-Tunes fan.
Man, I remember the day vividly when I heard Cher Do Believe all the way up to T-Pain. It just took the world over, and that's only a small part of the company. Their tools are so ubiquitous in terms of our usage. They become a verb, Herb. So now you auto-tune things.
Pretty cool.
Great company.
That says a lot about the product. It's also now a tool that can be used in live performances, all kinds of stuff. So you're going to get a chance to learn a lot about it, be able to win it. And here's what you can win for 4 weeks. We're going to give away Autotune EFX for 3 weeks, and the grand prize is the Autotune Vocal Studio, which is a whole suite, a bundle of plugins. All this brought to you by the good folks at Antares, a company that we think is an innovation-first company. So we're excited about that. For more information, you can sign up for our newsletter. And if you would, and we thank you for this, if you would like and subscribe and click notify, that would be wonderful. And now what's also wonderful is our incredible guest, a great friend of the show, one of the most talented guys we know, on fire with Tool and Slipknot.
Yeah, single-handedly moving the rock genre forward, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Welcome to the desk, the one, the only, Joe Barresi.
Great to be here.
Hey, dude, how are you?
Giuseppe.
Dave.
All right, we got to
let's
get the important stuff out of the way. Where did Evil come from?
Actually, it's kind of a weird story, but I was working on a Judas Priest record, and the drummer in Judas Priest is Scott Travis, who was in a band called Racer X. We were into Paul Gilbert, Bruce Boulez, Shredder, and they did a song called Evil Joe. And so he would call me Evil Joe. And as it turns out that there's a prank phone call that's Evil Joe's brother. It's an Evil Joe prank, basically. And so that's where it all came from. It's the short version of it.
Let me tell you how famous it is. So I'm on the phone today with our guy at Sweetwater, right? And Chris Flynn, and I was telling him you were on. He was like, "Oh my God, Evil Joe's coming on!" And then he goes into the whole thing and starts explaining it. So,
for a while, that was like on my contract. My credit would have to read Evil Joe. But then I did a few Christian records, and I thought,
that's a little tough.
Probably should take it off for these.
Yeah, maybe there's a cutout for the Christian records.
So now it's like, whatever you want, I don't care.
You have I just haven't heard the take explained that way, but you have a take in mixing that has to do with level, phase, and panning. Explain the relationship and your approach on those things.
Just from doing some classes, workshops and stuff, and balance is really, to me, is the basis of mixing. Like Chris Lord-Alge is an amazing balancer. He can get it. We get that balance together, and I find like a lot of kids that when they email or call or play me stuff, it's just everything's so over EQ'd. And so part of the thing I try to teach them is, first of all, listening. So if the drum part is riding a floor tom, and the floor tom's in the right speaker, and if you put the main guitar part in the right speaker, then you have a conflicting level. So panning comes into play then. If the hi-hat's in one speaker, maybe put the shaker in the other, unless the hi-hat's not so good.
Symmetry.
Right. So you panning is a huge thing. And if you find that you need to EQ stuff so drastically, maybe it's just as simple as hitting a phase button.
Mm-hmm.
You find you need to push a bunch of bottom end on your snare drum. Maybe it's just out of phase with your overhead. So
I think phase is the last thing most engineers grasp.
I think it's weird to me but when you see some consoles that don't have phase switches on the mic pre's, it's just weird. But I think back then...
Or Pro Tools without having a phase switch on every track.
Exactly. But you're right. It is one of the least thought about.
When we were doing the tutorial over at your place, you did something with the guitar mics where you had a technique to match the phase of the two mics that you were using. Can you describe that with the hand puppets and stuff?
Oh, yeah. So I think the original idea came from Keith Olson, who was a great engineer.
Legend, yeah.
Amazing. And his idea, or what he showed me realistically, was to get a microphone in front of a speaker and then to flip the phase of the second microphone. And as you moved it, listening to both with a set of headphones in front of your amp, just hissing, no music coming out of it, to get it to the quietest point. And then when you flip the phase on that inverted mic, then they were at the maximum phase coherence. Yeah. So I don't usually sit there now and just hiss the amp out and do that. I'll place the one microphone. Exactly. Just, make it noisy so I can hear the null. But I will get one mic where I think it sounds great, and then I'll move the other one till it cancels a lot.
Well, whatever you're doing, your guitar sounds are next level. Next level.
Oh, thank you.
They're more than sounds. They convey sound and tone, but they also convey a lot of the other elements, intangible ones from, emotion, feeling, vibe.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, because when you listen to your work on all the bands I mentioned earlier, and obviously Tool is having such a big impact now, your work is musical. There's some people's work that's technical, but your work is musical, and as you enhance what's going on, we were speaking earlier, but as I was listening to Fear Inoculum, I could hear these moments of progressive rock from back when I was in college. And was that intentional? Was I hearing something? I heard a little bit of Yes, and I heard...
Yeah, you're very right. I mean, it was on this album, the drummer, Danny Carey, and I, we talked about, because he integrated a rototom into his drum kit. And so I started going back and listening to all his influences, Bill Bruford and Billy Cobham and a lot of the Spectrums and Alphonse Mouzon and so many incredible, records that we listened to. Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So a lot of that prog influence actually prompted the idea of maybe cutting in a second drum kit. So on that song, at the 3/4 point, it goes to his drum kit when I was like, let's bring in another kit and do the second half of the song with another drum kit, thinking it might be a smaller kit. But he actually brought in his kit when he was 15 years old, which was a 12-piece Ludwig stainless steel kit with 10 toms, all mounted in pairs on a single stand back then, and they were all concert toms. So I actually remember the drum tech and I working for hours getting these basically paint cans to sound like cannons. And when he came in, I was so stoked. I was like, hey, check it out. And he heard the drum kit and he goes, well, it sounds too good, man. It doesn't sound like it did when I was 15. So can we get it to sound like...
sound worse.
Yeah. We'll set it back to the prog era, where it sounded like single-skinned toms and mics shoved in the holes. And so that's where it ended up.
The other thing, of a number of things that you've done, and God, for as long as we've known you, which has been forever, you just keep, and I think there's a part of what I think you always do is you're curious to keep learning and keep, working really hard. That's part of the Joe Barresi philosophy. Is that what you recommend to kids as well?
I do. I mean, if you're not inspired by music, how do you inspire somebody else to make music?
Right.
Or listen to it.
Or listen to it. And listening is really the key that I find is when you stop the Pro Tools rig or the tape and they keep playing, you're just like, okay, we need to listen to music now. You're not listening to anything but yourself. So that education, but I find it the great thing about this record actually was the fact that I could take a break I stopped when they went on tour, worked with Avenged and Bad Religion.
You could take a decade break.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, the Tool gives you breaks.
I was like, I'm going to mix a Slipknot song. So take a week off or whatever. And then I took a month to do Volbeat, and I took a week to do some live Soundgarden, and I took another month to do Slipknot, the record. So having that
That's a great record.
shift of focus elsewhere just brought me back more excited, as opposed to staying on, building a house for a year or whatever. I think it took 9 months in the end to make this record. Having those little breaks to see how other people are building houses was really...
I bet it was great.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Very rare. Go ahead.
Describe your arc in terms of your career path, because I think you guys check this out. There's some interesting concepts here that I think I never thought about, but I wish I had, because
well, when I first moved out here, I was repairing guitars. So I found, because you're a guitar player, the more you tinker in other areas, the more knowledge you bring to the table when you're working.
Yeah.
But what I really didn't want to do, I'd met a bunch of guys that worked in studios that were focused on a certain style of music, and they came up through these great places, but they were kind of pigeonholed into that workflow, into that console, into those clients. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be stuck in just a rock studio or just on a Neve. So I ended up taking a class at USC with Dick McGilvery on how to use an SSL.
Oh.
And he hired me to work in his studio. So I got to learn the Stevens tape machine and the SSL. And then he was doing mostly like Mark Isham and David Torn, which was mind-blowingly amazing music, but not the type of music that I played.
Right.
And then I worked at Sound City for quite a bit.
How was that?
Sound City was awesome because it was essentially like being in a rehearsal room. It was very unpretentious, and I find that bands were so comfortable there because the couch was a normal couch and not some super high dollar, And I always joke in that in the film, I said you can pee in the corner and nobody would say anything. And essentially, that was an extreme way of saying it was very comfortable to be there.
Stuff went on in those parking structures outside that
I
I spent some time in them too, so we'll talk about that off camera.
No, wait a minute. You can't just say that and move on.
Oh yeah, I can, because we're on camera.
And then I started working in a place called Preferred Sound, which was in a house that had a Trident console, and they had a sister studio in Chatsworth that was called Pacific at the time, but then it changed into Cornerstone, and they had a Neve VR with flying faders. So
that was a good console.
Great sounding console. And I think being able to work in the different rooms with the different clients and almost I tried to make the bands that recorded at Sound City maybe do overdubs in the cheaper room at Preferred and maybe mix over here at Cornerstone. So being in touch with the whole project at one time was really great too.
But I think, and to our audience, that kind of hybrid sense of this information adds to this information, and this location informs what I do over here. And
never being comfortable in one place, but also working in the smaller places. I was essentially the tech and the runner. So I had no problems going to get you a hamburger and then coming back and fixing the broken headphones. So it made it mandatory for me to learn things that I would have probably never, like we talked about earlier, aligning tape machines. And some studios I walked into, and
that
like
should be
A&M.
To have to align tape machine.
Well, you can go to A&M when they have the greatest tech staff in the world, and things got done for you. But then when I worked in my own place or in another studio that had no tech, I had to learn how to align a tape machine.
You know what really strikes me is the wisdom with which you approach that, because there's so many things that if you don't see Hugh Padgham do this or you don't see Clear Mountain do that, you don't get those little techniques in school because they're not taught.
Right.
Nobody knows them generally except the people immediately around that particular person.
But now I call you up and I say, "Hey, kid," because we used to run into guys in the hallway.
Yeah. And you do absorb it over time, and I felt like that was like the coolest thing ever about coming to LA, the access to walking in the studio and there's Alan Meyerson, and you get to, when he leaves, you get to look at all his stuff, and
Sound City had 2 rooms going at all times. And I remember countless times walking down the hallway and just thinking, what an amazing guitar sound. And then the band would leave and I'd look at exactly, or Eddie Van Halen was producing something. You're like, what's he got going on in here? Or Lenny Kravitz was doing Chicago. And it sounded mind-blowing. And I'm like, what's he cutting through? I never heard sounds come out of the Neve before like that. And he had brought in his own Helio stuff. And, and then he was running his power supplies at 24 volts instead of 18 or 36 or whatever it was. And that education you can't buy anywhere.
Can't buy and hard to replicate now. Because that kind of communal place where you can go and be, well, there are some that's just, now everybody has tools. But in this hybrid sense, you also are a guy with, level of success in what you do, but you're a combination of analog and in the box, and you combine and utilize it to what you need as opposed to letting it control you. But that combination is a strength, right? You found a way to make it.
I mean, it is. I used to anti everything that I didn't think was, Echo Farm, this is not an exact replica, blah, 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 or this Fairchild plugin. But in the end, it's just a tool. So to me, they all have merit. I love Echo Farm. I love the regular Avid plugins. If you have nothing, you put up the Fairchild plugin and it sounds different than the BF76. So listening to what those things do. So these days, I'm very hybrid in the fact that I still mix on an SSL. So that's my main, I'd say that's my main moves happen there. But when sessions come in that are bigger than my console, you have to mix in the box as well. And learning about those tools. I mean, it really is.
You said, I'm not trying to, this isn't one of those gotcha, catcha, predator things, but you said that you don't need an SSL to sound good. I happen to agree with that. Can you expand on that for the guys that are sitting home in a bedroom going, wow, Joe Barresi said that. I might be inspired now. We,
in my workshops, and we talked about this in France as well, we actually demoed just doing a straight bounce in the box and then doing a bounce to disc and then branching 10 channels out into a Mackie 1202. And then taking that same mix and putting it in an SSL X desk and then putting it on my console and listening to all the different things. And there's merit to all of them. So I think the thought of the crutch of, well, I don't have that gear, it doesn't matter. In the end, there's ways you can make anything sound good. What do you like about the console is it has discrepancies from channel to channel. So that makes everything a little bit wider or different. So
our friend Faye's there again.
Why not just do it in the box instead of panning everything 100 left and 100 right? Why not go 98 left and 94 right, or EQ slightly different on either side? So there are ways you can create that kind of analog feel in the digital world. I don't think you really need the gear. You just really need to focus on like in the end, I mean, music is music. You love it for what it is. I mean,
but your ear seems to, like some of your philosophy about outboard gear is that depending on how it's used and who uses it, who plugs in whatever, you get a unique sound that's not the same characteristics as everything else. And I think that your ear finds this individualism in the music that you make that makes the music stand out in a way. Is that on purpose, or is that just the way you hear, or am I right to begin with?
I think one common mistake most people make is they all try to get individual sounds that are great and then try to put them together in a mix.
So true.
In the end, like me, I remember spending half a day mixing and getting a kick drum in solo. It sounded like the most amazing kick drum I've ever heard in my life. And the second I unsoloed it, it was the most useless kick drum I've ever heard in my life. So
I had the same experience early on.
I think for me, I always say the part dictates the sound. So whatever the guitar part is or the bass part is going to tell you what the sound should be. And then knowing, like as a mixer or as you're fabricating it together, you can't really just get a drum sound and then pretend it's good and then, build on this house without knowing what the house is going to kind of look like. Now, you might build the wrong house in the end and have to go back. I'm doing it right now. I'm going to go back and retrack some guitars on something that I think could be better. Because in the end, your mind says, you don't really know where the low end is sometimes. Is it on the guitar or the bass? It doesn't matter. You just like the low end. So if you specific questions about frequencies and stuff. I never really can pinpoint any of that stuff. I wish I could. For me, it's all about using your ears. And does that work with that bass sound? I always track the bass after the guitars, honestly, because it's easier to fit the bass in the wall of guitar. So that does help. And another common question is about compression. And I never compress guitars. Guitars are already compressed.
If they're going through an amp.
Through a speaker. And so
off you go. And your musicianship helps you in terms of what you do, because you play guitar and play piano, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I'm more of a guitar player than anything, but sometimes I wonder if it's good or bad. I've worked with great guys like Mike Stone, who did Queen, and I remember working with him, just going, he doesn't really know a G from a D, but he knows what he likes, and that's really key. And we worked on getting a drum sound with him, and it was all about the drum kit itself, and then the head, and then the space in the room the drum kit was in, and then the microphone, and then the choice of microphones, and then moving the microphone. And in the end, it was a phenomenal drum sound.
Do you have several hats, producer, engineer, mixer? Do you prefer one or the other? Do you like it when it's all yours and you do your thing, or does that you lose objectivity when that happens?
If I produce, I usually do all three. A lot of times I just mix, but mixing to me is actually pretty horrible. It's one of those things where you have to focus at all times, and it's definitely creative. I love that part of it. It's always challenging.
So wait a minute. Joe Barresi said mixing is horrible.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's horrible. If I listen to your mix, it's exactly. I mean, I couldn't even imagine mastering after I mixed.
It can be.
Because I can't, making the decision is enough, and hearing it over and over and still trying to remain objective and musical, and trying to think about how you're going to hear it for the first time, and is it exciting? And that's enough mind thinking going on while you're mixing. When I'm tracking, it's more how you're feeling and governing the vibe of the room, and the whole camaraderie and the creating is much easier to me than actually, like, I could never master my own stuff. It would just be impossible to make the decision.
When you mix, do you have nobody in the room? Are you by yourself?
I usually do. I have an assistant, my dog. My dog's, my last dog would always get up and wag, and I always knew it would be a good song then.
This has been a 2-dog week. Last week we had a dog lover, Alex Tremay, and he
awesome.
He had the dog here. Absolutely.
I mean, my dog now is part mattress, so she doesn't get up at all. But if she does get up, I know it's probably going to be a hit.
Gotcha. But in that process, objectivity is something that you sort of have to fight to maintain, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of breaks, getting up and listening from another area, checking out Instagram and Facebook, and where your mind is not focused on the music.
Yeah.
Referencing. There's a great plugin, the Metric AB plugin. Are you hip with that one? And
I got a new one for you.
Oh, awesome.
That's it. Yeah, that's new.
Great. Putting that in and
that plugin.
Going back and forth. And even yesterday I have iTunes coming out of my computer with a song on it. I have the master link through the Apogee converter with a CD going, and then I have a couple tracks in Metric AB, and I'm listening to them.
Plus you can put roughs in there too.
Yeah.
Hey, speak to this, Joe. It feels to me that if your goal is to have as much influence as possible over the creative elements of our profession, it's not through mixing, it's through tracking.
Yeah, I agree.
What you say?
I think it's different now. I think most people record and then they think, oh, I'm going to get somebody to mix it and it's going to be amazing. But it really does come down to what you put there.
The influence you have while it's being recorded.
Yeah. My mind right now, even though I recorded this Chevelle stuff I'm working on, my mind says I need to do more to it. But then I find that if I take the EQs out, I like it better because I put it there to start with. So I guess it depends on a song by song situation, band by band situation.
Just recognizing a good take as opposed to a once in a lifetime take,
Yeah, in the end, nobody cares if something sounds terrible as long as they can tap their foot.
When was the last time you heard an alternate version of a song by a famous group that was better? Never.
No, but I have heard some alternate solos that are pretty amazing, which actually leads me to this thing I wanted to tell you about is this, it used to be on Sunday nights, and then this guy would recap on KLOS. His name is Christian James Hand. He does this thing called The Session. And it's fascinating to listen to. But basically, he has tracks and he solos them. So when Rick Ocasek died last week, he was able to pull up a couple of Cars songs and solo the things that are going on. And it's really a phenomenal education to hear. I mean, we all have tracks that we can solo up, but hearing how other people recorded, when you just hearing distortion or bad notes and then putting it up together, and you never hear that stuff anymore because the song is so good. And I think you kind of lose, like you read the Gear Sluts thing. It goes, oh my God, there's a little distortion on the, I got an Instagram thing after Tool came out and somebody's saying, what's that noise at this particular mark? And I was like, well, maybe that's where the bass went from mono to stereo and the guitar went from stereo to mono and the drum kit changed from his normal kit to the stainless steel kit. So quit thinking about it. Just enjoy it, man.
Yeah. Maybe it was
I used to be that guy too. It takes a while as you progress into. I'm not disagreeing with you. It is a little bit slightly annoying, but
and we probably,
you got these concepts you're trying to show somebody, and they worry about the hi-hat being a tiny bit in the red. You know.
Welcome to the internet.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And everybody has an opinion, but
that's just. And by the way, we should take a moment just to shout out to Rick Ocasek and to Eddie Money. Two folks gone too soon.
Let's throw in Benjamin Orr too, even though he's a long time ago.
When they played a little bit of Drive when they were doing the Rick thing, and it was so good. Yeah. When you hear some of these soloed guitar sounds on this thing, if you look at it's on SoundCloud, check it out. But
was that Mutt or was that
Roy Thomas Baker on some of it, and Mutt Lange? They were talking about how Mutt Lange took forever to mix something, so they dragged the tapes and brought it elsewhere or whatever. And but everybody has their own genius, man. Mutt Lange was genius, is genius.